The village of Agbara nestled itself between emerald hills, where the sun kissed the earth with the warmth of life. A sacred river, known as the voice of the ancestors, wound its way through the heart of the land. Every villager believed the river carried the whispers of their forebears, who watched over them from the spirit world. Each morning began with offerings at its banks, calabashes of yams, beads, and palm wine, to honor the unseen eyes that guarded their peace. Ife, a tall and soft-spoken man, walked the land with purpose, his footsteps light yet firm, as if mindful not to offend the spirits beneath the soil. He was known for his kindness, a man who shared his harvest, even with those who mocked his simple ways. His farm, passed down by his father, stretched wide, with fertile ground, teeming with life. Efe, the elders often said, "You are blessed, for the land loves you as much as your father did. Honor it, and it will never fail you." Efe would only smile and bow, his heart full of gratitude. But in the shade of his home, his wife Amina sat by the fire, her thoughts restless. Beautiful as a dawn's glow and just as fierce, Amina was admired by all, but envied for her sharp mind. Born into a family of traders, she had grown up dreaming of markets far beyond their village. Yet here she was, tethered to a life of planting and waiting. As the fire crackled, her younger sister Zainab, gentle and curious, asked, "Amina, why do you seem unhappy? Does Efe not care for you?" Amina sighed deeply, her fingers playing with the beads around her neck. "Care? Yes, he cares, but sometimes care is a chain, Zainab. This land is his pride, not mine. I long for more than this." Zainab frowned, her voice a whisper. "Sister, do not let your heart stray too far from home. Ambition can burn hotter than fire, and fire does not know when to stop." Meanwhile, Tunde, Efe's younger brother, stood at the edge of the field, watching the life his brother had built, his fists clenched as envy churned in his stomach. "Why him?" he muttered to no one in particular. "Why must he have everything, while I till borrowed soil?" When Efe made his way to the elders' gathering that evening, he carried news that sent shockwaves through the air. "I have decided to transfer the land to Amina's name," he announced, his voice steady. "It is my gift to her, my way of showing that her dreams matter as much as mine." The elders murmured among themselves, their faces clouded with disapproval. Finally, the eldest, Baba Ade, spoke. "Efe, do you not understand what you risk? This land is not just yours. It is the blood of your lineage. Giving it away is like cutting the root of a great tree." Efe bowed respectfully. "Baba Ade, I hear you. But love is its own tradition. If I cannot honor my wife, what good is my name?" The village buzzed with the news. Some saw Ife's act as noble. Others whispered that it was foolish. In the privacy of their home, Amina accepted the gesture with a forced smile. Yet, as she stared at the land, a strange bitterness began to grow within her. "Calls this love," she muttered to herself, "but it is still a chain. Only now he's handed me the key." Though Efe slept soundly that night, a quiet storm brewed in the shadows of their home, one that neither love nor tradition could foresee. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the fields that Efe's ancestors had tilled for generations. Amina stood at the edge of the land, her arms crossed tightly. The fertile soil stretched endlessly before her, but to her eyes it was not a symbol of abundance. It was a chain. Her mind drifted to the stories her father used to tell, of bustling markets and caravans that brought silk, gold, and spices from lands far away. "This," she whispered, glancing down at the soil beneath her feet, "is not the life I dreamed of." Amina's thoughts turned darker with each passing day. She began to resent the simplicity of the village and the traditions that held her in place. The land, once a gift of love, now felt like a weight tied to her soul. She thought of the city, its lights, its markets, its endless opportunities. Tunde, with sharp eyes and a mind quick to exploit, noticed Amina's growing discontent. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, he approached her by the well. His voice was soft, almost conspiratorial. "Sister-in-law," Tunde began, his tone laced with false concern, "I see the heaviness in your eyes. Does my brother's love not satisfy you?" Amina hesitated, but eventually sighed. "Efe's love is kind, but kindness is not enough. This land, this life, it feels like a trap." Tunde nodded, feigning understanding. "You speak truth, Amina. My brother means well, but his mind is bound by tradition. He gave you the land, but do you not see? It was not a gift of freedom. It was a way to control you. Now, everything you do is tied to him." Amina looked at Tunde sharply, her brow furrowing. "Control? Ife? No, he wouldn't." "But he would," Tunde interrupted smoothly. "Think about it. Would he let you sell this land if it were truly yours? Or is he watching, waiting, knowing you will stay tethered here?" A seed of doubt took root in Amina's heart. She said nothing but turned away, her thoughts racing. Word of Amina's dissatisfaction began to ripple through the village. By the time the elders gathered under the baobab tree, the air buzzed with rumors. "Did you hear?" one elder murmured. "Amina is unhappy with the land. She has spoken of selling it," another added, shaking his head. "The ancestors will not forgive such a betrayal." The elders sent for Ife. When he arrived, they confronted him with grave faces. Baba Ade, the eldest among them, leaned heavily on his staff as he spoke. "Efe, we hear troubling things about your wife. She speaks of selling the land you gave her. Do you understand what that means?" Efe's face darkened, but his voice was calm. "Amina would not betray me, Baba. She is restless, perhaps, but she knows the value of what we have. Restless minds lead to restless actions," Baba Ade replied. "You must take back what you have given before it is too late." But Efe shook his head. "My love for her is greater than my fear. I trust her." Unbeknownst to Efe, Amina had already begun to seek a way out. One afternoon she met a wealthy merchant by the edge of the river. The man was dressed in fine robes, his fingers adorned with gold rings that glinted in the sunlight. "This land of yours," the merchant said, his voice smooth as honey, "is worth more than the life you live here. I can pay you enough to leave this village and begin anew." Amina's heart raced at his words. "What do you mean?" The merchant smiled. "With what I offer, you can have the freedom you desire. No more fields, no more whispers of the elders. Just the life you choose." The promise of escape was intoxicating. She nodded, her mind made up. That night, as Ife rested under the soft glow of the moon, Amina sat by the fire, her face illuminated by its flickering light. She stared at the documents the merchant had given her, papers that would transfer the land into his name. Her hands trembled as she signed. Her decision was made. She would leave. The land was no longer hers to tend. It would be her ticket to freedom. But as the winds howled through the village that night, the spirits of the ancestors stirred. Whispers of unease carried on the air, curling around the homes and the fields. The ground beneath Amina's feet seemed to shift, though she did not notice. The betrayal had begun, and the land itself would not stay silent. The sun dipped low in the sky as Amina met the merchant at the edge of the sacred river. The papers were spread out on a flat stone, their weightless presence a stark contrast to the heavy burden she carried in her heart. The merchant, dressed in fine robes, smiled as he handed her the pen. "Sign here, and the land is yours no more," he said, his voice smooth and enticing. Amina hesitated for only a moment before pressing the pen to the parchment. The moment the ink touched the paper, a gust of wind swept through the trees, carrying with it a whisper that seemed to rise from the earth itself. She ignored it, her thoughts fixed on the promise of freedom. With the final stroke, the land that had been her husband's pride, his legacy, was now lost to an outsider. That night, Amina sat by the fire, packing her few belongings into a woven basket. Her eyes darted around the home she had shared with Ife, each corner filled with memories of his kindness and devotion. She shook her head, brushing the thoughts away. "This is not where I belong," she whispered to herself, as though convincing her own soul. "I was meant for more than this." In the distance, Ife lay under the stars, the soft hum of crickets filling the air. He dreamed of the future, unaware of the storm that was brewing. The next morning, a child from the village played near the river. He watched with innocent curiosity as Amina exchanged hurried words with the merchant. Later, when he saw Ife walking toward the fields, the child ran to him. "Uncle Ife!" the boy called, his small legs kicking up dust. "I saw Auntie Amina with the big man from the city by the river. She was giving him papers." Ife stopped in his tracks. "What did you say, child?" "She was writing something, uncle," the boy repeated, oblivious to the weight of his words. "She looked worried." Ife's heart sank. He clutched the boy's shoulder, a mixture of fear and disbelief washing over him. He turned toward home, his pace quickening with each step. When he arrived, he found Amina sitting on the veranda, her face calm but her eyes distant. "Amina," Ife began, his voice trembling, "what have you done?" Amina looked up, startled. "What do you mean?" "The child," he said, his voice rising. "He saw you with a stranger at the river. He saw you sign something. Tell me it isn't true. Tell me you haven't sold our land." Her silence was answer enough. "You don't understand, Ife," she said finally, her voice cold and sharp. "This land, it is your pride, not mine. I gave it away because it was never truly mine to begin with." Ife's face contorted with pain. "You gave away what my father worked for, what our ancestors protected. For what? A promise of gold? A fleeting dream?" "You wouldn't understand," she snapped. "You have always been content with this small life, but I am not. I will not let tradition bind me to this place." Ife stepped back, his hand trembling as it covered his chest. "You have not only betrayed me, Amina. You have betrayed the ancestors, the village, and everything we were meant to protect." The news spread quickly through the village. By the evening, the elders had gathered under the great baobab tree, their voices filled with anger and sorrow. "She has sold the land," one elder said, his voice heavy with grief. "The land that carries the blood of our people. Ife must act," another added. "If he does not, the spirits will not forgive this desecration." As the villagers murmured in agreement, the skies darkened unnaturally. The sacred river, once clear and sparkling, turned murky, its surface rippling with an unseen force. The crops in the fields wilted overnight, their once vibrant leaves now lifeless and brittle. The elders took these as signs of the ancestors' wrath, their anger spilling into the mortal world. "This is what happens when the bonds between the living and the spirits are broken," Baba Ade said solemnly. "The ancestors will not rest until balance is restored." Meanwhile, Amina sat alone. The merchant, fearing the village's growing unrest, had vanished, leaving her with nothing but regret and isolation. The villagers avoided her, their once friendly smiles replaced with cold stares. Even Zainab, her sister and confidant, had turned away. "You cannot expect sympathy," Zainab had said before leaving. "What you did, it is unforgivable." Amina's once proud shoulders now sagged under the weight of her actions. She looked at the empty fields and the desolate river, and for the first time, she felt the full weight of her betrayal. Efe, too, was a broken man. He sat in silence under the baobab tree, his head bowed, as the villagers worked tirelessly around him to restore what they could. His grief was a silent storm, his love for Amina battling with the pain she had caused. Though the community rallied to restore harmony, Efe remained a shadow of himself. As the days passed, the village began to heal, united in their determination to honor the ancestors and rebuild. The land might have been lost, but their spirit was unshakable. The elders led prayers at the river, their chants rising into the air like a bridge to the heavens. "We are one," they prayed. "Guide us, protect us, and forgive us." Though the scars of betrayal ran deep, the village stood firm, bound together by their shared heritage and the lessons learned through pain. The sacred grove stood silent, shrouded in the soft light of dawn. The air was thick with the scent of earth and leaves, and a profound stillness seemed to hang over the space, as though even the birds dared not interrupt its peace. Efe, his shoulders heavy with sorrow, knelt at the base of the ancient Iroko tree, the one believed to house the spirit of the ancestors. He bowed his head, his voice trembling as it broke through the quiet. "Spirits of my fathers, hear my plea," he said, his tears falling to the soil. "I have failed you. The land that you blessed us with, the soil that holds the memory of your sweat and labor, has been defiled by my hand. Forgive me for my blindness. I offer myself as your servant to make amends." He reached for the calabash of palm wine he had brought, pouring its contents onto the roots of the tree. The liquid soaked into the earth, carrying his prayers deeper than his voice could reach. Efe's hands trembled as he laid down a piece of his father's farming cloth, a token of connection between past and present. "If my life can cleanse this land," he whispered, "then let it be so." The elders stood nearby, their faces stern, but their hearts moved by Efe's humility. Baba Ade raised his staff, gesturing for the villagers to gather around the sacred grove. "The ancestors have heard his cry," Baba Ade declared. "But words alone cannot heal what has been broken. We must restore balance through the ritual of atonement. The villagers murmured in agreement as the elders prepared the ceremony. A circle was drawn around the iroko tree with white chalk, and inside it, offerings were placed: yams, kola nuts, and a carved gourd filled with sacred river water. Efe stepped into the circle under Baba Ade's guidance. He carried a young plant, its roots still wrapped in damp soil. "This plant," Baba Ade announced, "will grow where destruction has laid waste. It will carry our prayers to the heavens and remind the spirits that we are still their children." As Ife placed the plant into the earth, he whispered, "Let this mark the beginning of our repentance." He poured water from the sacred gourd onto its roots, each drop a promise to honor the ancestors. The villagers joined in, singing ancient hymns of renewal. Their voices rose together, carrying hope into the skies. From a distance, Amina watched. Her heart, once hardened by ambition, began to soften. The sight of Efe kneeling in the soil, surrounded by a community united in grief and resolve, struck her with a wave of shame. She thought of the land she had sold, now empty of life and purpose. For the first time, she saw not the opportunity she had chased, but the emptiness it had left behind. "How could I have been so blind?" she whispered to herself. Her hands clenched at her sides, her pride crumbling under the weight of her guilt. That evening, under the great baobab tree, where the villagers often gathered, Amina stepped forward. Her face was pale, and her voice wavered as she began to speak. "My people," she said, "I have sinned against you all. I have betrayed not just my husband, but our ancestors and the life they entrusted to us. I thought only of myself and forgot the roots that give us strength." She turned to Efe, tears streaming down her face. "Efe, you gave me your trust, and I repaid it with betrayal. I do not deserve your forgiveness, but I beg for it all the same." The villagers murmured amongst themselves, their emotions a mix of anger and sorrow. Baba Adi raised his hand to quiet them. "Forgiveness is not easily given," he said. "It must be weighed carefully, for it binds the heart as much as the soul." That. The elders deliberated while the villagers shared their thoughts. Some argued that Amina's betrayal was too great, while others urged compassion. After much debate, Baba Ade finally spoke. "We will forgive," he said, "because unity is our greatest strength. But forgiveness comes with a price. Amina must dedicate herself to restoring what she has broken. She must restore her relationships to their natural order." The following days brought signs of renewal. The sacred river began to clear, its once murky waters sparkling under the sun. The fields, once barren, sprouted green shoots, promising life where there had been none. The villagers took these as signs that the ancestors had accepted their atonement. Amina threw herself into the work of rebuilding. She labored alongside the villagers, her hands blistered and her back aching, but she did not complain. Each act of labor felt like a small piece of her redemption. Ife, though still hurt, began to soften toward her. "We cannot undo the past," he said one evening as they stood together in the fields. "But we can build a future that honors what we have learned." As the village returned to prosperity, the elders gathered once more under the baobab tree. Baba Ade, his voice steady and wise, spoke to the villagers. "This tale will live on," he said. Let it remind us that greed and ambition, when untethered from tradition, bring ruin. But let it also teach us that redemption is possible through humility, love, and unity. The villagers nodded, their faces lit with hope. They sang songs of renewal late into the night, their voices weaving a tapestry of resilience and grace. In the end, the land healed, as did the hearts that tended it, proving once again that even the deepest wounds could yield to the power of community and forgiveness. In the heart of the village, the sun rose each day as a witness to the lives intertwined beneath its golden light. It saw the clash of Efe's devotion to his ancestors with Amina's longing for a future unbound by tradition. Efe believed that the land was more than soil. It was the memory of his father's hands, the sweat of his grandfather's brow, and the blessing of spirits long departed. For him, life was about honoring the past to protect the future. Without the wisdom of those who came before us, Ife often said, we are like a tree without roots. We may stand tall for a time, but we will fall when the wind blows. But Amina's heart yearned for something else. She dreamed of the city, of bustling streets and possibilities beyond the horizon. The land, to her, was not sacred, but stifling. A cage built by traditions that didn't consider her dreams. This rift, though silent at first, grew between them like a crack in the earth, shaping decisions that neither could fully control. Efe's love for Amina was unshakable, even when her dissatisfaction began to surface. He believed that his gift of the land would show her how deeply he trusted her. But trust is a fragile thing, and Amina's betrayal tested it to its limits. When Efe discovered her actions, his heart felt as though it had been struck by lightning. "How could you do this?" he asked, his voice heavy with pain. "I gave you my everything, my land, my heart, my trust, and you sold it all?" Amina's voice wavered as she replied, "You gave me something I never asked for, Efe. You call it love, but to me, it was a chain. Their love, once a strong bridge between them, now lay in ruins." Yet, even in his despair, Efe held onto the hope that love could withstand betrayal, though it demanded a strength he had never known before. For Amina, the weight of her actions grew unbearable. Watching Efe's humility in the sacred grove and the community's unity in restoring the land opened her eyes to the consequences of her ambition. The greed that once fueled her dreams now left her empty, and she realized that redemption could only come through action. Manasira Bu, which means the shaman fruitful. She approached Efe one evening, her voice trembling. "I was wrong," she admitted. "I let my desires blind me to what truly matters. I don't know if you can ever forgive me, but I want to try to make things right." Efe's silence was heavy, but it was not harsh. Finally, he said, "Redemption is not found in words, Amina. It is found in what you do next." With each passing day, Amina worked tirelessly to rebuild what had been broken. She labored in the fields, her hands blistered and her back aching, but she did not complain. The villagers, though wary at first, began to see her efforts as genuine. Slowly, the woman who had once been blinded by ambition transformed into a symbol of humility and resilience. As the crops began to sprout anew and the sacred river cleared, the village elders gathered to reflect on what had transpired. Baba Ade, leaning on his staff, spoke with the weight of generations in his voice. "The ancestors do not act without reason," he said. "Their anger was not to destroy but to teach. When we stray from the path they have set, we must be reminded of its importance." The villagers nodded, their faces solemn. The spirit's wrath had been a warning, a reminder that harmony with tradition and moral values was not just important, but essential. In the end, the village stood united, stronger than before. The story of Efe and Amina became a lesson passed down through generations. Parents told their children of how greed and ambition, when untethered from respect for heritage, could lead to ruin. But they also spoke of how humility, forgiveness, and unity could heal even the deepest wounds. The village thrived once more, its people bound not only by the land they shared, but by the lessons they had learned. And as the sun rose and set over the fields, it bore witness to a community that had rediscovered the strength of its roots, standing tall in the face of any storm that might come.